My guests are here, and they have all just flown in from the East and West Coast, and their agents have negotiated their time with me today. And so what we're going to do today is talk about getting promoted. Hopefully, this is part of the Teaching Academy Drama-Free Promotion Cohort. It's brought to you by the Teaching Academy. And we had a choice. We could either just do some sort of static lecture where you'd hear me drone on for an hour about the kind of tips and strategies about how to get promoted. But I thought that this might be good for a talk show format. This is instead of having a panel discussion, and some of you have been to the panel discussions that the university puts on for RPT. And I have already arranged for them to do special ones for the college. But they tend, like many panel discussions, they tend to be very static. And I tried this particular format out a couple years ago, and I kind of liked how it works. And so instead of, members of a panel, you have guests on a talk show. And what we're going to be talking about are tips and strategies or in this case, the deep inside secrets about how these three people managed somehow to get promoted. And I was shocked at the time, frankly. And they all got promoted, and God knows how. So why don't we start by introducing ourselves, starting at the far right.
Okay, I'm Matt Pointer from the Department of Medicine, Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine. In July of 2015, I was promoted to full professor.
On the tenure pathway.
Okay, Tom Chaton, research pathway. I was promoted in the same time frame as Matt. I'm endocrinology, and I've been doing the same thing for about 25 years as far as research. So I do research, teaching, and some administrative stuff. So.
I'm Rebecca Wilcox. I'm a GI and liver pathologist. I was promoted to associate professor on the clinical pathway.
And I would have included somebody on the educating scholar pathway, except that's so new, we haven't really promoted anybody on that pathway just yet. Although I think getting promoted on the teaching pathway is pretty clear cut because the kinds of things that we look at and evaluate. So ladies first. What are you wearing today anyway?
This is Coco
Is
Chanel.
it Prada? Coco Chanel? Oh, fantastic. I love
From
it.
Kohl's. Knockoff version.
So, what do you remember? I mean, I realize it's sort of been a while ago, so you may have forgotten all this, all the pain
Oh, no.
went away.
You remember, right? Filling out the green sheets. You don't forget that.
You know?
No.
So were you worried about getting promoted, or?
Do you want me to be complete? I mean, this is a talk show, so I have to be completely
Yeah.
honest, right? It's more, to be completely honest, it's the finding the space and time to fill out the green sheets that I worried about more than anything. That's the reality of it.
Just filling in the green sheets.
It's an undertaking. It's an adventure. It takes more time than you think. Just like writing a grant or writing a proposal, it takes more time than you think it would, and also, like anything else, I think you have to be in the right headspace to do it. And the more prep you do up front, the easier it is. But if you haven't prepared your CV in a way, or you haven't been keeping good records, it can really be quite an undertaking.
So what part of the record keeping would you recommend that people?
Earlier than later, I would say the earliest thing I would do is, one, your CV, I would keep up with it all the time. I would not get behind on my CV. And build your CV in a way that fits the green sheets. And if you're in a department that your chairman has you do this on your annual review, then it's easier. But if I know the departments are very different in how they handle this, so that you might have to be forced to do it on your own. But I would, at least on an annual basis, reevaluate that CV in maybe every 6-month basis and make it fit the green sheets. So, you know, in other words, things that you may not think of, like mentoring and advising, that should be on your CV. Things that you do in every single day that you may think is just part of what I do, but it's going to be something you want on those green sheets. So I would get it on your CV, maybe a smaller form, or if you're applying to the teaching academy, it could be in your teaching portfolio. That could be a more expanded form. We'll push for the teaching
Yeah.
academy.
Now, did your chairman or unit director tell you that it was time to get promoted, or you just thought, well, geez, it's time to get promoted?
Well, I felt it was time. I mean, I reached a point where in my career I said I meet these criteria. I think I'm ready, and my husband was also asking me if the paycheck was ever going to go up. So it seemed like a good time, and and yeah, I mean, so I went through that evaluation, or you know, our annual evaluation, and I asked my chairman. I said, I think it's time. Do you think it's time? And she said, let's do this.
Okay.
And she gave me good notice, which was helpful as well. Because you definitely need notice, because I think one of I'm a planner, so I like to know what the bottlenecks are, and one of the bottlenecks is this arm's length letter. So, I mean, it was great because my chairman said, okay, let's start planning now. And then this was good too, she set me a deadline that was 2 or 3 months before the green sheets were due. And, you know, if you
Now, is that due in the department or due in the dean's office?
due in the department.
Okay.
But I had to meet with her first, and so that you don't want to show up to your chairman's office with work not done. So it was sort of a way to push me to get it done.
So this would have happened in advance of anything that the dean's office said to the department?
Yes.
So when did you have to have it done for the department, would you guess, Rebecca?
You know, it's funny. I sit on the
Just guess, I
I
mean.
sit on the actual committee now, and I still don't even know
I'm
what
guessing
dates was.
around June.
Yeah, it was. It was early, maybe even a little earlier.
But so about this time, one should be actually thinking about doing all of this to give yourself plenty of time.
Yes. Who would make good arm's length letters? Who could I ask? If I'm not on a national committee, or if I'm not on something that I can do that, maybe I should start asking around and thinking about that.
We'll circle back to that,
Yeah.
because I think that's been my experience. Big thing. Tom?
Well, to add to that, one of the things that I forgot as I was putting mine together, and I think for my promotion that went into effect in July of 15, this was started in mid-2014. But one of the things that's easy to forget is all the little things you've done, the abstracts at talks, the posters that you forget about. You might be not a first or last author, but these things are all important. And instead of leaving this blank, it's quite easy to forget these things. So putting that stuff in. I will say that our department, the Department of Medicine, has been very proactive about that. I think they look into this 9 to 12 months ahead of time to make sure we don't miss these deadlines, to make sure that everything is in, first of all, to the departmental office, and then so it's ready to go to the dean's office. So we were constantly prompted to meet these deadlines. Arm's length, very important. For me, that was one of the more easy things. I think my particular situation was different because I was recruited in '99 as research track because for a lot of reasons I wanted to get here quickly. I loved it and I loved the possibilities. But then I went for a while, then I was promoted to associate professor research track, and then I had the opportunity to enter as tenure track. And then I came up to a particular point to where I lost my funding. Everything was wonderful. I had good grants up to a point, but then, and I had, good papers. But then, there was some question as, is this really going to work when it came up to tenure? And so I had the opportunity to go sort of backtrack and go to research track, which I did, and I'm glad I did.
You are? So why are you glad you went to the research track?
Well, it took a lot of stress off of me. I mean, I was not, the issue is if you don't make it, that's, and, I think the departmental support was there and probably at the college level, but there's that level of, things are tough. This is back 4 or 5 years ago. I had tried repeatedly to renew my R01. I just could not do it.
Yeah, I remember that.
And, I thought, well, I'm gonna be safe and I'm gonna be continuing doing exactly what I wanted to do anyway. Teaching and research, a balance of both, and university service, so I'm glad I did. But I was not hired tenure track, and so, I don't have any regrets on what I did because I'm still doing pretty much the same thing. But,
So you pointed out something important, and that is in the department that you're in. But they sort of get after you about timelines and stuff. Well, what recommendations would you have for somebody who's not in a department where they're watching the shop and taking
Yeah.
care of you? I
Well-
mean, your mother doesn't work here, despite what
Yeah.
some people think.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of what we're doing now, you've got to keep on top of this. My faculty mentor, division chief of endocrinology, he was after me on this more than I was. I guess I've been, maybe like some of you guys, in the lab a lot. It's easy to sort of get distracted and say, what's more important? Well, let's get this experiment done and I'll worry about my own promotions later. Well, that was kind of the attitude I had for a while, but so I was constantly prompted there, but I mean, it's only you that's gonna get this thing going. So easy to forget, but you need to make goals for yourself. But I will say that it was easier for me because the medicine department is quite good in making sure you stay on track, so.
Matt?
I'd say the only
Your
thing that,
situation's a little different. You're on the tenure track, so there's, milestones that you have to meet.
right. So my perspective is document right away. I update my CV every week, every 2 weeks with something. Something has happened, something that needs to be documented. Is this a CV that you're going to share with the whole world? Well, maybe not, but something's happened. And you just can't let them be forgotten or let it go a month. You need to look at opportunities that come your way, opportunities to serve on committees or to serve the university, and definitely on the tenure track. I think the requirements are a little bit different, that you need to be doing something university-wide. So I served on the faculty senate, I served on the department chair search committees, I served on a university-wide committee called Envisioning Environment that was meant to make environmental type research and studies on campus more accessible, more unified. Things that took a lot of time. Some were times away from the lab for a couple of weeks in order to do a university type service. So, those rob from your own individual productivity, but there's something that you need to do to demonstrate that you're a university player, at least on the tenure track.
So in your situation, because you're on the tenure track, you have to be that triple threat of service, teaching, and research. Tom, who's on the research scholar, although you do teaching and you sit on committees, et cetera, you don't have to. And you can get promoted without it because there's no requirement for that. Similar would be the teaching pathway, where teaching is the only thing you need to be concerned with. Your situation, it's kind of like tenure, I guess, in a way, because you can excel at any one of the three, whether it's research or teaching or service. So it's a little bit more of a fielder's choice in that regards.
Well, there's certainly sections for every one of those on the green sheets. You
Right.
don't want to turn it into blank. It's, the other time-consuming piece I was thinking of is the piece that, because think about how different we all are, and any one of us could be, the people reading our green sheets don't know us or necessarily what we do, or could be really in a totally different world, mathematics, or something very different than what we do. And I think that to me was a very time-consuming piece, because you're writing for someone who doesn't really understand what you do for a living. So that's a time piece, right? Because you have to sculpt it in this way that they can pick it up and understand what they do. And that to me was one of the most time-consuming pieces. It's easy if you do the same thing I do, and I'm just showing you I'm doing these 6 things, because I don't have to go into it's this beautiful language of explaining in a succinct way what I do and why it's important for the community, and that's time-consuming.
And your audience isn't just as different as the three of us. It's people down in English or Russian studies who
Yep.
need to understand what it is that you do and how you contribute.
So maybe as a means of explanation, the process kind of goes like this. sometime in the late spring, early summer, depending on your department, you're asked to put your green sheets and all the supporting documentation through a committee in the department, as a case in medicine, but in other departments, smaller departments, they wouldn't necessarily have that step. All the documentation, whatever is going to be needed for your promotion has to be in the dean's office by November. The committee, the Faculty Standards Committee, which is the committee that assesses your dossier, meets during late November, December, in a number of meetings, 2, 3 typically, because like for instance this year we had 30 promotions. The year before we had 40, so it was a little longer. And then the dean looks at that and writes a statement and agrees or disagrees with the committee. And that leaves the College of Medicine on or about Christmas, first of the year. It then goes to the Professional Standards Committee, and this is what you guys are talking about. The Professional Standards Committee is a committee made of faculty throughout the university. Now, they don't get us. They do not understand, particularly what you do, Rebecca, the idea of a physician and how does that work. These two guys, they have a much better idea of the kinds of things they do, but you're more of an enigma to them. And what you were saying was important. They want a narrative somewhere that tells me who Matt Pointer is, who Tom Chachan is, what's their job, what were they hired to do, what, they want to get to know you. They don't want, 10 pages, but they want something that tells, so that Matt's right. I mean, you have to write for that audience. And they sometimes may not understand what you do as a clinical service, but they sure understand the teaching part. So that's why for folks like you, presenting the teaching aspect is important, because at least then that's a touchstone for them.
And sometimes it's fun, the language is confusing too, because we see the word service and we think it means that, our patient care service, and they don't mean that at all. They mean this administrative work and committees like Matt was talking about, and so it's even the language is kind of funny.
Yep. And the interpretation one.
Exactly.
So these guys take actually quite a while. They're fairly slow and methodical about their evaluations. And then that all gets to the provost, and the provost signs off on these. And we do not get the letters, whether you've been promoted, and you didn't get your letters until about July, the following year. So you guys all started probably back in May, June, or even before that in your case.
Yeah, definitely.
And you do not hear for over a year.
That's correct.
And the take home here is no news is good news. Because if there's a problem in the promotion process, you'll hear about it. Your chairman will call up and say, well, there's been a little snag and we've got to either withdraw the application or figure out a way to quickly fix it. Matt, do you have any other sort of thoughts about what people should be doing other than updating everything all the time?
I think the one thing, and I'm guilty of not even following my own recommendation here, is get involved in a professional society and be active in it. It's a way to get to know people nationally and internationally, and you'll need that type of a reputation as you progress through your career. Go to the meetings every year and get to know people. That's really important. I think that's...
So the two things I see all the time is a CV that does not capture what people have done. And you've noticed that all three of my guests talked about documentation of what you do. And the second is a failure to have any kind of a national, international reputation. So you all had, now you have to have 3 letters, Tom needs 3 letters. Matt, because he's on the tenure pathway and he's special, had to have 5 letters, because 3 probably wouldn't capture how wonderful he is, so.
And remember, these, like we said, these are arm's length evaluations, and so I think even though it doesn't say so in the instructions. I think it's good to provide a narrative to your department chair that says why you think these people are best able to judge you, and maybe you can sway him or her to ask particular people. And a bigger list is better than a shorter list. And
How many did you have in your list?
a dozen at least.
Tom, how many did you have in yours?
think
But
I
we
had
whittled it down.
10 or 11, and of course, you don't know who they pick, because not
Right.
all of them are reachable.
And Rebecca, how many did you have in yours?
I picked 6, but I'm also picking people that I know the personality types. They're gonna do it. You know what I mean? There's just personality types. You know, it's the people that answer your emails right away, and there's. But
Well, that's good. That's actually, I never thought about that, but that makes sense.
yeah, it's not an easy thing.
And-
And then you never know. That's the thing. You don't know. Your chairman obviously will tell you, but it's like there's like weird, right? This weird where you ask, but then you don't really know if the letters came back and who the
Well,
letters
yeah.
responded. So it's an.
And then we have to look at the letters and make sure that, the language at the beginning of how I know this person doesn't get us into trouble.
And I was taught the language right at the beginning that says that this person is a full professor. So not only do you have to make friends in faraway places, but they have to be important friends in faraway places as well, which when you're a junior person, that can be intimidating or difficult.
So how did you guys develop these relationships with, so I'm hearing that we had close to 30 people on these lists.
National committees are the best. I think because if you're on a committee with somebody, then you didn't publish a paper with them. Maybe they're the chair on the committee, you sit on it, so they have an idea of who you are. They've worked with you, but it's not. You didn't train with them. It's a different relationship. I think that makes it easier to ask for.
You guys?
Yeah, for me, it was, so I study pancreatic beta cells, and I pretty much know everybody in the world that studies them, and they know me. So we're a group of about 100 to 200 people, and I know most of them, and I've luckily been working the same cell type for 25 years, so that helped. And there's 2 basic people in diabetes, those that study insulin resistance and those that study beta cells. So I sort of got,
But how
Made
did
it
you
easy.
meet
Wouldn't it
them?
be harder to get arm's length? I would think if it was that small
Well,
a world.
I don't publish with them. These are people, I guess and also being on study sections, I'm on beta cell study section. So people you know and respect, but you sort of, you read each other's grants, and I would say that's a kind of a specialized situation that I was fortunate enough to have, but it was quite easy for me to come up with, ones. And when I said, it's an international group, a good many of them are in the Northeast. There's another group that I'm a part of that's a Northeast Islet Biology Club that's very active. We actually have meetings here, but there's world-renowned people that show up. So I'd say in that respect, I was very fortunate to have a group that, I don't really publish with these people because we all do different
But
things.
you go out and get drunk with them?
That's the truth of it.
Write that down.
Go get hammered. Go out with Alice and get hammered and talk her into writing you a letter. Matthew, how'd you?
Be a courteous reviewer when you're asked to review a manuscript. Get to know who those section editors are. They might be someone that you'll ask for an arm's length review at some point. Typically, you're in a very similar field. When you're invited to review for the NIH, do it and use it as on time to project who you are. Let people get to know who you are. Work your butt off on your reviews in the written critiques as well as in the oral presentation of them. That's a lot of stress, reviewing, and take it seriously, and you get to develop relationships that'll be valuable in the long term. And again, does the national organizations, if you're a part of that, volunteer to be on some sort of a committee where there is someone more senior that can help pull you along. They can do great things to advocate for your career, not only here, but if you had to go elsewhere.
Now, did you just put these names down, or did you actually talk to them about, geez, I'm coming up for promotion, I might put your name down for a...
I never
was
told
told-
anyone,
yeah.
but people knew. They knew it was about that time in my career. They'd
You
been,
didn't have a star on your head or anything?
no.
No.
They just pay attention. People will get it.
Well, they've been there too.
You didn't, so you didn't offer to buy them off, Tom?
Actually, I did. No, I think it was, no, I didn't notify anybody. But these are still people I respected enough to at least they, I felt like they liked what I did, and so obviously I didn't.
Well, how'd you know they liked what you did? Did they come up and
These
tell
are
you?
people that I've known for 20 or 25 years,
Okay.
since I was a postdoc. So once again, some of them are not really mentors, but they were people that knew what I did and always came up at meetings and talked with me, and vice versa. So
Okay.
I helped train some of their people, and but once again, it's not arm's length if you know them that well. So there's got to be a mutual respect. So a lot of people, you think, oh God, I did publish a paper back in '97 with them, and that's just not going to work. So,
And now, were all your letter writers related to what you do clinically or teaching? or-
2 out of the 3. The third one was Sheila Chauvin, so it was education related. But I think that's interesting too, because it's like, they see your whole green sheet, so it's like she could speak to a different aspect than I think the clinicians could.
Right.
So I think that's helpful.
And the other 2 were people you knew from national committees for your specialty?
One was a national committee, is a pathologist, but not in my field, and the other one is a woman who I really respect. I've never done a paper with her, but so I thought about who's my mentor in GI pathology. I can't obviously go to him, I was a fellow under him, but who is in his sort of world, who's his group of people he hangs with, and so I know her a little bit from meetings because you see each other at national meetings, and I really respect her work, and so I thought that's a perfect.
And every one of your letter writers were full professors, or probably, right?
Yes.
2 full professor, yes, but earlier part of my career, no, they weren't necessarily.
No, because if you're going up for associate professor,
I had them to be at least the rank that I was seeking.
right, you could have a couple that way.
I guess, I'm sorry, but
No.
the thing that I don't even know, having been through this, is really who are those letters of recommendation being written to? Are they written to the department chair to inform them how to write their letter? Is it being written to the College of Medicine? Because I know certain language wouldn't do well down at Waterman.
Well, I think, I always, I get asked to write these kind of letters all the time, and so I write them to the person who's asking. Now, some of them will say, address it to the committee, and other people will say, address it to me.
No, I mean like literally the tone of the letter.
Oh, the
Is
tone.
that to be one that informs at the college, at the department, or at the university?
Yes,
Yes, yes, and yes, but because
because
that
you've got all these different audiences, right?
right, and hopefully, the department chair requesting the letter makes it apparent what the purpose of it really is. I mean,
Okay.
there is a boilerplate type of.
Well, I think that's another reason to go
Habit
after
that goes
more
with it.
senior people, because these senior people are people that are well-known, write these letters fairly frequently and probably sat on these committees, so they kind of get it. And so they're gonna write a letter that, if they were on a committee, they would find compelling, or they tell you, I'm not gonna write a committee, or when they get the request from your chair to write it, they go into the trash.
That's a good point too. It's just that, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, but when the request for the letter goes out, they also, on top of seeing our green sheets, they see the requirements here, right? Because that's an important point, because obviously we don't have the same. I mean, I know there was one woman I put on my list who I originally put on my list who I assumed was an associate professor, but she's at a different institution and their criteria is very different. She's still sitting at an assistant professor, even though, you look at her CV and she's very qualified. So there's obviously different criteria, different universities, so it's good to know that the person, writing your
Right.
letter sees what the criteria are here.
Yeah, I think in faculty affairs, we talk about the fact that once you've seen one medical school, you've seen one medical school. Everybody's rules are a little different. One thing I know, I've been asked several times when I've been asked to write letters, to comment on whether that person would be promoted at my institution, whether it was Colorado or here, and in which I can, obviously speak to with a fair bit of authority. And so I think they look for that. Okay. Now, the one exception might be Harvard, where no one gets promoted, but I mean, it depends. It's, again, pretty contextual to,
And I don't recall, the information that goes out to the letter writers, is that your CV or your green sheet documents? I
might be-
recall it being the CV,
I think it's just the CV.
which means that it has to be
The green
interpretable
sheets-
not just to you, but to someone who's never seen
You
it.
have to understand that as far as I know, as far as my experience has been, the only place that has green sheets is here. It's a peculiarity to this process, and it has an interesting history to it, apparently, from what I've been able to deduce. So if we sent the green sheets along to these letter writers, they wouldn't know what to make of it. But understanding what the criteria, but you know, the criteria are vague enough. And most people at that level and that experience would actually kind of know what the bar ought to be. At least they know what the bar is at their institution. Now, since this is such a critical issue, do any of our audience members have any comments or questions? Yeah,
So do you ask people to write letters for you, or you just provide?
your chairman requests that person. So way that's usually done, and we can find out from these guys how it's done in your department. Did your chairman ask you to provide a list of 6 people and
Yeah.
12 people? So the chairman asks the candidate to provide that list, and then the chairman sends them a letter with the CV, sometimes with or without the criteria. There's also a form that we have that the person writing the letter fills in to indicate how they know these people. Have they ever published with them? You know, things that would disqualify them as not being arm's length.
And so with regards to publishing with someone, what if you're 10th author and they're 11th author on something? Is that still considered publishing with someone?
Technically, yeah,
Okay.
it's a problem, particularly if you're in the world of genetics where there's 50 authors. That becomes more difficult. Now, one way you could maybe get around it is point out that, and this has happened to me a couple of times, I'm on these papers with about 50, 60 authors, and I'll just say, I don't know this person. Never, outside of this, and neither one of us are the principal authors of it. Never even met them, don't even know them.
But can you be on committees with these people?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because it was more of a committee thing, like the national guidelines.
Well,
committee.
isn't that how you got your people?
Yeah, but I wasn't on a paper with this particular person.
Yeah, so if a statement comes out that gets published, yeah, you run a risk of not being able to.
It's like,
include
do you
that
want
person.
more publications out of your CV, or do you want an arm's length letter?
Yeah.
That one-
I still think you could make a strong argument that it's arm's length, and here's the reason why, like Charlie said.
I mean, the way I look at it is if that person trained you, you have a grant together, you've published, you know, on the same topic together as a collaboration, it's in their best interest to get you promoted. So that's a conflict of interest. If you can clearly understand, you know, if that person could give a rat's hoozy about whether you get promoted or not, then it seems to me that's a, you know, remember, even the NIH has less strict conflict of interest rules than we do.
Are you given the opportunity to like present why they're acceptable as an arm's length letter?
Well, it gets evaluated. I mean,
Like, so at which point, like say that it goes to the faculty standards committee, and
Yeah.
then questions arise whether these arm's length letters.
yeah,
are
that's
okay.
happened. It's happened. So you want them as clean as possible.
But is there any place they could fill out like why you chose those people?
Well, there's I send this form that's on the front says that they are qualified as arm's length,
But they fill that out.
right? And then usually somewhere in there, somebody writes, you know, like why this person was chosen.
Yeah, the first 2 paragraphs will be all about how they know you anyway.
How they know you.
Sometimes those letters get sent back to be, the first paragraph to be rewritten.
Yes.
To clarify that. So it's in your best interest to make sure that your chief knows of any kind of, anything, like, you know, if you were on a 400 author paper, just let them know that when you pass the names along, so that they'll be looking for that when that letter comes back.
So the department should look, the dean's office does look. If there's questions, it's usually shown to me, and I decide whether it needs to be redone or a new person replaced or whatever. This
It's
is why
best if that gets fixed at the department.
I
before it goes.
violently agree. This is why you have to have a list of, if you need 3, I would say you need a list of 9. I mean, at the rate that, and remember who we're talking, every one of these folks here was talking to people that are well-known, busy, full professors, and they get 1 million requests. So you having some kind of relationship with them, or in Rebecca's case, where she kind of knows that there are people that follow through with requests, are critical.
We've gone 10 deep to get 3. I mean, recently,
Yeah,
so.
I'm not
Department of
surprised.
Medicine.
Yeah.
Do you need internal for promotion to associate professor?
Technically, well, you need a letter from your chairman.
Yes.
If you're in a large enough department, you probably need a letter from your section chief. I sort of thought that those letters, I mostly tell folks, whether it's you or department chair, those are letters that at one level, and Ben can speak to that because he's been on the committee, they're kind of useless because the conflicts of interest are just, I think those letters, however, can be very helpful if your situation isn't real clear or there's some additional explanations that need to be made. That you have firsthand knowledge of something or other that's critical, that isn't going to come out, say, in the CVs or whatever.
Yeah, a good chief or chair will use the letter to kind of fill in the gaps.
Right.
In a way that you can't really do in the green sheets.
Right.
But I mean, they have to say, I want you to be promoted, it's their job, so that part doesn't really have much purchase.
But other people in the department may be able to shed some light on some activity that's novel, different, out of the box. I mean, if you're running right down the pathway, you've done all the right things and filled in all the check boxes, you don't need them. But if something bizarre has gone on or something a little different, something unusual, you know, I could make up a bunch of crazy scenarios, but you know, it's mostly if it's out of the box kind of
Things
stuff.
like leaves of absence and stuff, I think
Yeah.
routinely are explained in those letters in that context.
Right.
Does the letter have to be from an academic physician, or can it be, for example, for a physicist, also professor? So if I work closely with, in that field, and I know people in the Department of Physics and other institutions, is a professor of physics okay?
Sure, why not? Because they're judging your attributes as a physicist or your contributions to the world of physics or your credentials as a physicist or, you know, whatever. I mean, in my situation, it's the flip. I'm a Ph.D., but I was doing a lot of clinical work during the periods of time that I was being promoted. So now I'm going to have MDs commenting on my clinical diagnostic skills or whatever. Okay, so sure, I mean, if they have insight into you and your contributions to the field, and they happen to be in the hard sciences or clinical sciences or whatever, totally out of the field is fine. So I mean, any last sort of thoughts you have that?
No, I think there's always the little, there's a culture in Vermont, we tend to be humble, and I think that's, don't be afraid to write down, I mean, we have very busy lives, and there's no shame in documenting what you're doing. I mean, I know a lot of you in this room, I think the stuff you're doing every day that you're probably not even putting on your CV, which have really changed the culture and the institution as a whole. There's no shame in documenting that. It's good for your promotion, but it's also good for all of us. If you're not proud of us, then how can the university be proud of it? So don't get too Vermonty and humble about it. Put it down.
It's not in your best interests. You know, on that same vein, I was just talking to Gordon Jensen, our new Senior Associate Dean for Research, and he said, wow, there's some people that really do great stuff here. And I said, every year, Ben's on the promotion committee. I mean, we get dossiers and we go, wow, who knew that we had people at this place doing this sort of thing? And that's one of the reasons we have the wall outside of the dean's office, because all three of you have been there, and there's a nice little snippet of what you've been doing, and you go, I see people out there every day kind of studying, like, who knew?
I love it. It builds community too, because it's like you may not know if someone's not in your department. You're like, oh,
Right.
I didn't know they got promoted. It's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like
but
that.
I just, when I'm looking at these dossiers, I go, really? I mean, how do these people find time to do it? That's one of the things I'm thinking through. Tom?
Yeah, something that just occurred to me, it's like, in thinking back and writing up mine a couple of years ago, is there's a glaring omission. You never want to do that, but it had to do with not extracurricular activities, but like community service or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And growing up, I was a Boy Scout, and when I worked on my master's and Ph.D., I had some interactions with Boy Scouts, but as you get older and more involved with work, you lose that. And I thought, well, I still have a deficit there, because I don't do anything community-wise, but I know that some very busy physicians in my department have been on their city council or on the select board of their town or something. And I know, especially if you're starting off, that's impossible. But if it's something else that goes on there, it'd be nice to fill up that void, and it makes you probably better rounded and more of a part of the community. But I still have a big void in that part of my background. Everything I do is pretty much academically oriented, but it's something to think about.
You came here to the talk show.
Oh,
Yeah, look at the community service. Do you
okay,
perform?
thanks, I can.
I
add a
bet
little
you, a
something.
lot of these people would write a letter for your promotion,
Oh,
you know? Matt?
At least on the tenure track, there is some flexibility in when you proceed to the next rank. Take control of knowing the dates. I think I've got this history that if I hadn't have contacted the graduate school I went to, I'd never have gone there because I lost my application. My first time going from assistant, my first set of green sheets for assistant professor, I was told with like 6 days that they're due. So something happened, someone was sick, and I was off the list. I brought up going to full professor a little after my annual meeting, and so it was kind of a rush. I looked at my funding. I said, you know what, this year's going to look better than next year. Let's maybe try to do it. So my time got really collapsed. Have in your annual meetings a discussion with your boss about when is the right time, because it isn't a greedy thing. It's really about your career and developing it. Your boss wants you to be successful. You want to be successful. So get on the same page and have yourself years out knowing when that next step is going to be taken.
So so two things I would add to that. One of the things I'm noticing in a lot of institutions is they'll have a presentation from a person in my position about when do you know you're ready. And the second is people can come and talk to me. I must get 2 dozen people a year, and we go through the CV and talk about what the plan is, and the question about, am I ready? Have I got everything set, ready to go? And I'm certainly happy to do that. In some departments, like medicine, we have another person you can go to, but some of the other departments do as well. Somebody that the chair is tasked with this sort of thing, or maybe you have senior people in your department who have been on the promotions committee and really have some insight to the whole thing. And so if you don't want to talk to your chair, there may be other folks to talk to. And again, you can make an appointment, come and see me if you wish. So I'm going to open it up now to the audience to ask any questions you want of any of our panelists, the guests. Matt, where'd you get that shirt, man?
My wife, actually, I picked it out. It's from
You did, okay. And Tom's got a new, you got a new film in the theaters opening on Friday?
I do.
Yeah,
Do you do all your own special effects?
yeah.
What are you talking about?
Is there any Oscar buzz around? No.
Oh, goodness.
The Beta Cell Man, that's the
Oh,
name of it,
okay.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, Beta sells at 8 New York. Questions? This is your chance to ask any questions you may have of our panelists. Well, we have a quiet audience today. Thank you for your time. Thanks for coming,
Thank you.
Thanks.
and I think we're done.